Welcome to Recovery Road. I'm your host, Merrit, Hartblay, as we bring together the wellness, self-care, mental health, and substance use communities to discuss issues of the day. I'm very excited about this week's episode. But first, if you're listening to the show, you can find us on your favorite podcast platforms, also at brandesenterprises.com. You can also find my first book, Lost Innocence, My Journey from Addiction to Recovery, on Amazon.com, both Kindle and paperback versions. And if you go to my link on Instagram, you can find the link to the audiobook of Lost Innocence. So I got one of my favorite guys back on the show this week, Jason Mayo. Jason's, I've known Jason for a while now. He's definitely a cool guy doing a lot of different things in recovery, and thought it was a good time to bring him back on. We had a couple things to talk about. Jason, welcome back to Recovery Road.
What's up, Merritt? How you doing, buddy?
Yeah, how's it going, man? What's
Well,
happening?
you know what I was thinking about?
What?
Just today, I knew I was going to be on the podcast again. I think this is the third time now,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
You know when what is it? The when they go on Saturday Night Live, like Steve Martin, there's like they have the Jacket Club. What is it?
Yeah,
It's like the Five Timer Club or
yeah,
something like that.
you're in the lead, man. You're in
I
the
feel
lead.
like I'm getting there.
You are. I'm gonna have to like an awards thing.
Are you going to get me a jacket
I will get you a
that says
jacket. Yeah.
Recovery Road?
I
A
think
nice.
recovery. Yeah, you know what? I was talking to Jess about putting some swag together. You know what we're going
Oh,
to do?
you should.
I don't mind mentioning it now, but we're in the process now. I think in the next month we've had a lot of requests. We're going to start providing. We're going to start offering advertising on the podcast.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, you were talking about that. I
Yeah.
mean,
So
I would definitely buy some swag. So
yeah, we'll
let
get
me know when
so
you do that.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So listen, since the last time we've spoken, you've gotten involved in a couple of things I'm really excited about, and I actually wrote an article for something. So talk about sober, not subtle, and how the whole thing came about.
Okay. I wish they had you could see my merch here.
Yeah,
It's
great.
so
I love it. Oh, I might have to get
yeah.
some of your merch. Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
talk to me about it because I set up the whole store. I can give you some pointers
Yeah,
or
I'd like to
something.
get some sweatshirt. I'd like to get one of those. It looks great. Yeah.
Yeah, so sober not subtle. This is something I do on the side, right? So like we met via work,
Right.
right? Because you
Right.
work at an outpatient and I work at a place we bring in and you had Bree on the podcast
Yeah,
last
she was
week.
great. She did a great job.
I kind of wanted to be there. I wanted to be there to talk with you guys because it was such a good
Yeah,
conversation. It's
she's amazing. In
crazy.
fact, I'm seeing her every 2 weeks now for Recce.
Oh,
It's the healing is pretty amazing. I'm really trying to take my spirituality to another level.
how lucky am I that I get to work with her and Aaron?
Yeah,
And
oh,
they're
you
both
are,
Reiki,
man.
like they're both Reiki
They're like both
people.
Recce masters. Yeah. I mean, that's crazy, man.
Anyway, have a good
Anyway,
life.
yeah,
I'm not gonna deny it. So sober not subtle. I mean the genesis of it is I love to write. I've always been a writer.
right.
Okay, I've written a couple of children's books. I used to write a blog. Before I got sober, I was writing a dad blog, right, and it was called Outnumbered. And at the time there was like mommy blogging was like the biggest thing, right? There were
Right.
all these huge mommy bloggers and it was like a craze. Like one of them got bought up by Disney and all this stuff. And I was like, I want to get involved in that, but maybe I'll write a dad blog. So I was one of like the first people to write a dad blog and it kind of took off. Like I won a bunch of awards and I was always on like the top 25 dad blog list and
Cool.
these mommy bloggers like, took me in their arms and sort of like helped me out. And so at one point I was getting like, 20,000 views a month on this blog. And the problem was I wasn't sober, right?
Hmm.
So, there's the great line in the big book that says, there's the person you are and the person you want people to think that you are, right?
Hmm.
So I was being the person I wanted people to think that I was. I mean, I was a good
Exactly.
dad, don't get me wrong. Like
I
I
know.
I I,
I
I
was
love my
too.
kids.
I was too.
I'd write these things, right? And it was like I just didn't feel good. I looked in the mirror and I'm like, you're a piece of shit. And I'm writing these great blogs about how great everything is. And it just didn't feel right. So I got sober and I kind of stopped writing a little bit,
Huh.
and slowly but surely the writing just kind of faded away because I was like, I don't want to talk about myself anymore. I want to do stuff that's not talking about myself.
Right.
And that's kind of what was great about sobriety because I got to be outside of myself and develop all over again as a new person, right? So I hadn't written in a very long time. And when I started working at this new career,
Right.
because we had that same in common, that career, right, in
Yep.
advertising.
Yep.
But I started this new career in recovery, and I was like, wow, I'm feeling really, really inspired again by the work that we're doing, in recovery. And I was like, I want to write again, you know. And then out of nowhere, I was just like, I started writing, right?
Right.
I started
Right.
writing, and I started a blog, and it was called "If It Hurts, It Helps," which we've talked about a little bit.
Yep.
And then I met Elise Bryson from
Right.
Sober
She's great.
Curator.
Yeah, I had her on. She was great.
She's the best. And I started writing for the Sober Curator. And the more I wrote for the Sober Curator and the more I wrote for my blog, I was like, you know what? I want to do something that's bigger.
Yeah.
And I also don't want it to be about me all over again. I don't want to
Right.
go down that same rabbit hole, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I was like, Sober Curator is this amazing lifestyle space, right? It's got like travel, sober travel, sober, non-alcoholic beer reviews, movies, book recommendations. It's like a community, right? For like lifestyle.
Hmm.
I was like, I don't want to do that, but I really think that there's value in hearing personal stories, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because that's the way you identify, right? And without identification, you think you're unique and you go into that self-pity and all that stuff. So by identifying, I always feel much better because I'm like, I'm not the only guy that feels like that. So, I took the if it hurts, it helps, and I kind of moved it over to a new brand, Sober Not Subtle, which I thought was kind of bold, and
Yeah.
it really made a statement, right?
Yeah.
Like, and it turned into this thing where it's really about advocacy for both recovery, people with substance use disorder, and also mental health, right? So trying to give people a voice, trying to normalize both substance use disorder and mental health, especially for guys, because that's a whole different story we could talk
Right.
about.
Right.
And the way I wanted to do this was by people telling their stories. So
And that helps break the stigma too. This
helps
helps break
break
the
the
stigma.
stigma. And you talk about that a lot.
I
I
talk about
mean,
that all the time. That's on a mission to help break the stigma because it's huge, you know.
you wrote a whole article for it on Sober Not
Yeah.
Subtle that we could talk about.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so then, it started to feel good. And I developed the brand. I gave the site a look. I developed a logo. And I was like, you know what? Let me do more than that. So there's, a part on the site where there's resources for treatment and things like that. Like KPC is on there and Thrive is on there and FCA
Right.
and all these different resources.
That's
There's a
cool.
whole page on the site dedicated to self-care because we know how important self-care is. There's a whole page on the site dedicated to the peer movement. If you're interested in becoming a peer and what training courses and resources you have to do, there's a whole page on the site about podcast recommendations, which yours is on there.
That's cool. That's cool.
And it's just so there's like a mission, and
That's
we're
good.
coming up on 100 posts
Wow,
in
that's
less
great.
than 6 months, and I've got
Wow.
about 22 in the queue. And I have people like you that are writing. I have psychiatrists. I had a playwright that wrote. I had a father that lost his daughter to a fentanyl overdose. Um, I have an article that's coming out soon about a guy who found out he has ALS
Mhm.
16 years into sobriety,
Wow.
right? And they said he was going to live 5 years, and it's 25 years later, and he's still around. He
That's
can't.
because it's all like in the head, you know. The body is very resilient if you do the right things, you know.
He's sharp as a tack. He just can't move. He can't do it. You know how it's a terrible disease.
Right.
But the fact that his story is like, it's all walks of life, and I'm just so happy with it. I'm just so happy because people are talking to me about it. They're commenting, and I'm getting submissions from all over the country, and I have a well of people that I can go to because of the work that we do,
Sure.
right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
going around, I'm asking people, can you write an article? Can you write this? And
Yeah,
they're like, yeah,
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's just turned into something probably more than I expected it to be, but hopefully not even close to what it could become, you know?
So it brings up something else which we were going to talk about is creativity in sobriety.
Yeah. Yeah.
Talk about that. It seems to me that, I always knew, when I got sober, I started learning about addicts are very, very creative people. If they spent half their time on creativity instead of half the time on the drugging and the drinking that they did, they could put out some amazing stuff. And it's happening, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it's happening with you, right?
Yeah,
Because look
yeah.
at your podcast. I mean, it's great to reach people and there's the mission and destigmatize and all that, but it's fun for you, right? It's
Oh
it's
yeah, I love it. I know. I have the best time. I mean, it was writing the book that led me to the podcast, and now I think we're looking about doing some other things. I was talking to my producer the other day about doing some more stuff because I want to take the message even more. How
yeah.
do we get the message even out there more?
Yeah, and it's not that common for me. Passion and creativity and work never intersected in my life ever.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I was in a creative business, right? We were
Yeah.
in advertising. I was in visual effects and animation,
Oh
but
yeah.
I hated commercials, and I'm making commercials, and we're doing great work. But I wasn't happy doing it because I wasn't the guy creating it. I was the guy getting the clients and stuff, right?
Yeah. But were you drinking then?
Oh yeah, I installed beer taps at the company I owned
So,
because I
and
thought
I
that was
think
a
about
good thing.
that. So when I was back in those days working for the Black Book, and representing production companies, animation, live action, music, and sound,
Yeah,
I think that if I had been sober, I'm not going to go backwards, but I probably could have done some amazing shit. I could have
yeah,
done so much more creatively, but I was like you, trying to be the person everybody else wanted you to be, try to, and it was like living a lie. It was like living a lie.
yeah. And I'm not very good at compartmentalizing things, so I couldn't take my drinking and my alcoholism over here and then do the work over here and
Yeah, no.
creativity
Yeah,
over
it was
there.
all
It was
mixed up. It was
one
all
big
mixed up. Yeah, it was
freaking
all,
mess,
yeah.
right? But the creativity thing is, so I want to do creative things, and so the writing for me, like I said, when I got sober, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know what I liked. I didn't know who I was, right? So all these things that I thought I liked, slowly I was just like, I don't want to do that anymore. So I had to find things in sobriety that I actually like doing again. And this I was just talking to you before the we
Right.
got on about this streaming thing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I love entertaining. I'm always kind of like been the ham in the room, like I
Right.
like being the jokester. And I always love playing video games, but I never really got a chance to do it because I never had the time. And during COVID, I built the studio, and now, like I said, I'm playing video games, making money playing video games,
That's
which
crazy.
is not the point of doing it, but it just so happens that I am, and I have fun entertaining, and I do these funny things, and now I can do this sober not subtle. It's the writing is one part, right? That's fulfilling to me creatively because I love writing and I just love challenging myself, writing different
Hmm.
types of things. But the thing that's really, really, filling that bucket for me right now is the brand, is building the brand, right? Designing the website, building the brand,
Yeah,
doing the social media marketing,
yeah,
like really trying to like expand on the brand because that's
yeah,
kind of what I did
yeah,
in my other life in
yeah.
business,
I'm
but I
trying to do the
didn't
same
enjoy
thing.
it
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
and
yeah.
now I'm having fun, so I'm even better at doing it now than I used to because I actually want to do what I'm doing.
Well, we should talk about some things too, because I was noodling some stuff around with Jess the other day about a YouTube channel,
Hmm.
a YouTube channel. And bring together some creative forces like you and me and just do a show, and talk about sobriety and bring on guests and things like that. Make it like like you would have like a Johnny Carson show, but make it for sobriety, you
We
know.
we got to think of a better reference so people know what that means.
All
What,
right.
a Jimmy Fallon show,
The
I
Jimmy
guess.
Fallon show, like,
Yeah, nobody
something like
knows
the
who Johnny
Tonight Show, but
Carson is.
but like a talk show, but like for sobriety.
Yeah, I'm just
Because I've
messing
seen a lot
around.
of people out there that have a lot of podcasts and stuff, but I think that there's more we can do.
Yeah.
There's more that we can do. I
Well,
mean,
the video thing too. I know right now the podcast is audio. I know that. And that's very common. That's what most of the people do. But, there are statistics that show that people are more likely to watch a podcast than they are to listen to it.
oh yeah, Jess and I have been talking about it. We're going to take it
Hmm.
to video. That's the next step. We're going to
Yeah.
build a website. We're going to take it to video.
And
We
you're a
have
good
like a,
looking guy. Like
yeah, thank you. We
you don't
have like,
have the face for radio. You're made for a podcast
we have some
video.
steps we're going to take along the way. I think that it's got a long way to go. And Jess and I met for about an hour the other day and talked about a bunch of different things. And that's when the whole thing about, I've had people coming to me about advertising. We're going to launch this whole advertising platform.
Hmm.
And I think it'd be cool for people to do that. And yeah, I just think that, but think about like what's next for you. I mean, what are you thinking about doing next? I mean, you've done this now, sober not subtle. I mean, are you writing another book? What are you thinking about doing next?
That's a really good question. Like I've only written children's books and I really like that. There's two things I'm kind of would like to do and it's so not in the forefront
Right.
right now, but I have an idea for a children's book about um addiction.
Oh, great. Talk to me because I have something to tell you. So talk to me and I got something to tell you. Okay.
It's very hard to figure out a way to talk about addiction to a kid, right?
Yes.
Because you can't come out and make a children's book about Johnny with the needle in his arm. It's just
No,
not, that's not
no,
the message, right?
no.
So I was thinking, I have a whole bunch of metaphors and, that in symbolism that I've written down. So it would be more like, um, kids walking into a forest and he meets this magical tree and the tree offers him, you know, magical whatever, a fruit and stuff. And every time he eats the fruit, he feels really, really good. It makes him feel good, but he keeps wanting to go back to the tree to get more and more fruit.
So here comes the
So he,
addiction piece, right?
right. So there's a whole thing like, so
Oh,
I'm
wow.
trying to figure out ways to weave it so kids can understand that too much of one thing is not a good thing, and it could start causing problems because it's going to take away from all the other things in your life. So I have a whole bunch of stuff that I've
Oh, I got it. So listen, this could be pretty amazing because I've been on this kick for a couple of years to bring education into the schools at
yeah,
the elementary school level. So I met with a couple of state senators in the last month, and I put together a whole 16-week curriculum on
wow,
mental health and substance abuse to bring into like elementary schools. And but I'm thinking that maybe, I think this book idea is great that you're going to do it. And you should talk to, I mean, I think it's amazing because Jess is actually work on a couple of things in regards to some other things she's doing,
yep,
but about kids, how to teach kids. But we could put together like a whole audio visual presentation on addiction for children, and maybe present that, because I just think that's the missing piece. That kid that was on my podcast, Gracie Parker,
hmm,
about 6 months ago. She has his
such
website,
a great episode.
whyuskids.org,
Yeah,
and she's talking about mental health with young kids. So I think that's a great idea. That's a great
yeah.
idea.
And you don't think kids have the capacity, like emotionally, to talk about that stuff,
They
but then you
do.
hear Gracie and you're like, whoa,
Oh, no, they do. They
yeah,
just need people to, like when I learned in social work school, you have to meet them where they're at. You have to meet them at their level
yep,
and let them know you understand what's going on because I believe that we're never going to stop the flow of drugs. It's never going to happen. But
right.
if we can increase education, prevention, intervention, maybe we'll stop people from buying the drugs.
Right. And the problem is too, and it just to get finish up with this is I'm also like 15,000 words into a memoir,
Oh, really? Oh,
which is
wow.
again a very slow boat, but I found myself over the last year or so, just writing thoughts, and now I'm just sort of putting it together. So I'm through like almost to college, right? And it centers around my mental health and my addiction, but from when I was a kid.
Well, yeah, that's
Um,
great.
yes, that's
Yeah.
another thing.
That's good. Listen, it took me like, several years to write my book, but it was really about, and that one was supposed to be, Jess and I decided it was going to be like a short one, 50
Yeah,
pages from when I was born to the day that I got sober. But the next book I'm writing now is really all about mental health. And
yeah,
it's the next chapter, but it's like the subtitle is It's Okay Not to Be Okay.
right. Yeah,
Mental health. It's okay not to be okay.
I had an old sponsor that used to tell me in the beginning, it's okay to feel like shit in sobriety, you know?
Well, it's not always a great day, right?
No, and then the best thing that I ever heard, I might have told you this before, but he said it's okay to get in a rut, just don't decorate it. It's one of the greatest things I ever heard in all
Yeah.
my sobriety, right?
Yeah.
So wait, I wanted to just to go back real quick about
Uh-huh.
the curriculum.
Yeah, yeah.
First of all, I'd love to see that
I'll
because
send it to, oh yeah, I'll send it to you
yeah,
offline. I'll definitely
I
send it
would
to
love
you.
to see it.
It's pretty amazing.
I know a couple of like superintendents of
Really.
schools on Long Island. I happen to be really good friends. I grew up with one of them, a superintendent of schools around here in this area. So,
Yeah.
and he's very interested in all of that stuff.
Oh, so
So
you could send if you can make it, I'll send it to you. And
I'll
if you could
make
set
you
up
an
a meeting.
introduction.
Yeah, if you
Yeah,
make because I think it's so necessary, but it's funny, it's like the big elephant in the room nobody wants to talk about. But I think that in elementary school, if a kid's going to math class or social studies or English, they should be going to mental health and substance abuse awareness class and
right,
create a curriculum that they can understand. There's it it's like you said, kids will understand if it's presented in a way that you meet them where they're at. If you meet them where they're at, it's amazing. I think that's the missing piece for
You know
sure.
what the
So
thing is too? Like there are social workers in schools. I don't know if they're in all the schools and guidance counselors, but I don't think most of the schools have drug and alcohol counselors in
they
the high
don't.
schools.
Oh, they don't, and they should have on staff.
Yeah.
They
There's a
should.
great one in Northport, the high school there. Um, Anthony Ferrandino, I think is his name. He's a freaking great guy. He's a drug and alcohol counselor who works at Northport High School, and he sets up Rap Week. He's had us speak there. He has
Wow.
resource fairs for the kids, and he's very
Oh, you got to
very
let me know. I'd
active.
love to take part in something like
He's
that.
so good, but
You
like that's
know,
what all the high schools should do.
well, the
Um,
funny thing, there's a movie, I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's called The Anonymous People.
I've heard of it.
And it's a great movie. I show it at Outpatient all the time. And it's about this movement that started about 20 years ago that instead of people in recovery saying, my name is so-and-so and I'm a recovering addict or alcoholic, it says, my name is so-and-so and I'm a person in long-term recovery, which means I haven't had a drink or a drug since a certain date. Because
Yeah,
the word recovery isn't as stigmatized as addiction. You know,
person-centered
but in
language.
the
It's a big
movie,
deal.
in the documentary, I actually had one of the guys in the documentary on my podcast, Kristen Johnston, who's an actress, used to be in she talked about how New York City, there should be sober high schools in New York City. There's ones in Boston, other parts of the country,
Yeah,
but you couldn't get one built in New York City. There should be sober high schools. There's colleges now have sober, like Rutgers University has a whole sober college, you know.
there is a sober high school on Long Island,
There
and
is.
yeah, I can't think of
Wow.
the name, but I've met the guy that runs it.
Oh, really?
After the podcast, I'll look it up and I'll
Yeah, I
send
mean,
you the
to me,
information.
that would be what I would love to do now would be
Yeah.
teaching in a sober high school.
Oh man. Yeah. Even if
That,
you did it like once a month
oh
or
my
something
God, no,
like
I
that.
would love to do that. I mean, that would be, I could, like we're starting a new thing at KPC
Hmm.
uh in January. It's going to be, I came up with it. I said we need to have a class on relapse prevention. So I put together a 16-week course on relapse prevention because so
Right.
many people relapse because they just don't establish the right tools. So I think education is so important. I mean, the work that we do, it's so important that we continue to get the message out because the more people hear about it, the more they read about it, collectively we can break the stigma.
Yeah. And I can talk about person-centered language all day long.
Oh my God.
I, I just wrote an article about reframing the language around relapse. Okay, because a person that used to work at Thrive, he doesn't work there anymore. Great guy. He used to always say to me that every time somebody said to him, "I relapsed," and you can't. Most people don't say I relapsed and they're really happy about it. You know, I know
No.
in AA we clap when somebody comes back and you want to encourage people, but he said, "Don't call it a relapse. Call it an interruption."
Yeah, that's even
Because you
better.
didn't lose all the
No,
knowledge and
you
the
didn't.
wisdom and the
You
experience you gained.
you didn't.
It was an interruption, and now you push forward again. And I've been to like sober houses talking to guys, and they say I just relapsed. I'm like, guys, do me a favor, for a week. Instead of saying relapse, say interruption. Every time one of your buddies says relapse, correct him and say interruption. And you're like,
Yeah.
wow, I like the word interruption. You
Because it
know?
shows that, you know what, you're still you're getting back on the horse and you just pick up where you left off. You didn't lose any of that time. You just have to get back to the basics.
Yeah, and I don't want to get too into it because it's sort of like I don't know how I feel about it. It makes me feel a little weird to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, but
But
you know what, we have to, we have to change things. We have to create new verbiage
well, let
things,
me ask you a question though. Okay,
okay.
you're an AA guy.
Yeah,
I'm an AA guy.
right.
It got me sober. It keeps me sober.
Yeah.
I owe my life to
Yeah,
AA.
me too. Me
I'm
too.
very active. You know,
I
I'm gonna
got
go to
it.
a meeting every day over vacation,
Yeah.
right? So, but the thing is, the more I learn about the different pathways of recovery, and the more I learn about AA and like something like smart recovery, right?
Yep.
They're framed way more around the person-centered language.
It's more like
Like,
CBT. It's more like cognitive behavior therapy. It's more scientific approach.
right, but at an AA meeting, you say, "Hey, my name is Jason. I'm an alcoholic or I'm an addict," right? Smart recovery, they don't believe in that because they say, "Okay, you could be an alcoholic, which is not person-centered language to begin with, right?
Right.
But you're also a husband and you're a father and you're a coworker, and you're a brother. So we don't say I'm an alcoholic.
What are they
We just
saying?
your name. I'm
Okay.
Jason. It's good to be here, whatever. So it's a very different approach with AA. You say it because it's the very nature is reinforcing that step one when you say it every time. So I don't have a problem saying it, but I'm just saying like
Well, I'm
we're
trying.
talking about person-centered language, but yet that's not really person-centered language
Yeah,
anymore.
well, I'm trying to break it. At my last anniversary celebration, it was my name is Merritt, and I'm a person in long-term recovery, which means I haven't had a drink or a drug since
Yep.
September 24th, 2008.
Yeah.
Because by saying that, it has more of a positivity thing instead of saying I'm a recovering addict or alcoholic. I'm trying to break the stigma.
Yeah.
More people are not going to ask for help if they don't know that it works.
Yeah.
So
I want.
let me ask you. Well, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
So Bill and Bob, when they started AA, it was all about anonymity,
Yep.
right? First name only.
Yeah.
But this whole movie, The Anonymous People, it's a whole different twist. So I believe, this is just me, I want your opinion, that people that have long-term sobriety, I think have an obligation to let people know that it works, that recovery works. That so then because if they it's like in the movie it talks about if gay people never talked about AIDS, never had AIDS research. If women
Right.
with breast cancer had never spoken up, we wouldn't have the Susan B. Komen Foundation. So don't you think that something needs to be done regarding recovery?
Yes, but it is a comfort level, right? Because you might have somebody who is in a profession that you know, not only is it going to be frowned upon, I know that's a stigma, but it's just, it's different, right? Like I never once in my, you know, all my drinking years, and I drank for 25 years, and all my years in the career that I was in, as much as
Right.
drinking was acceptable, never once when I got sober and I was still working in that career did I say that I was sober. You know, people sometimes on Facebook, they post their chip on their anniversary.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Never,
it's a very private thing.
never.
It's a very personal thing
Now I
now.
scream it from the
Well,
rooftops.
me too, because I think, at least for me, I'm proud
Right.
to say that I'm in recovery, and I'm proud to let people know that you can rise
Yes.
up from the ashes and change your life.
But so to answer your question,
Yeah,
yes, I think it's important to speak up if you're in long-term recovery and normalize sobriety. Like Elise Bryson, she would tell you first off
yeah,
to
yeah.
definitely do it. But I think it's more about people like us, like Elise, like you, like me, to provide the proper platforms for people that
Yes,
want to speak up in sobriety. Because
correct.
you can't expect everybody to do that
No,
because of their
no.
family. There's reasons why you can't, and
Right.
that's okay. There's a huge place for anonymity, and I believe in that. But Sober Not Subtle, Recovery Road Podcast, you know,
Yes.
Sober Curator. We need more of
So
that.
I did a couple of texts though after my anniversary celebration. I got a couple of texts from people saying, "I'm really glad you said that because it makes me feel better
Yeah.
about the pathway that I'm on.
Yeah.
You know, that I'm in recovery as opposed to a recovering addict or an alcoholic."
Yeah.
I don't
It's
know, man.
it's
It's
tough.
it's
It's
tough.
tough.
It's tough.
I get it. Did you ever get back in touch with Steven for
No,
Sober
yeah,
Dad
but he
Crew?
hasn't gotten back to me. I told him here's the times for us to speak and stuff, but I haven't heard back from him yet.
Stay on him. Oh,
I will. I
such a
will.
good guy. You would have so much fun on that podcast.
Yeah.
He goes real deep. Like get ready, you know, have an energy drink with you because
No, listen, man.
he goes pretty deep.
I just think I know you're big too with like dads in recovery, right? That's
Yes. The dad thing is
dads
which
in
is interesting because I write a lot about that on Sober Not Subtle
right.
too. You know, and when I go to an AA meeting, like I look for the newcomers that have kids. You know, when I got sober, my kids were 7 and 3, right? And you know, the story that I like to tell, and it led to other stuff is, you know, when I first got sober, my kids were so young, and you know, I was out of the house a lot. So like I used to make pancakes for my kids on Sunday mornings, right? That was my
Nice.
big thing, the dad breakfast, right? But
Nice.
but you know, Saturday and Sunday mornings on the weekend, I was going to meetings now, and I felt horrible about it. So
Uh,
I would go out, and they'd be like, "Where are you going?" And I'd be like I felt like I was lying to my kids because I couldn't tell them I was an addict, right? But
I'm
at the
going to the
same time,
doctor.
yeah, but how many doctors can I go to,
I
right?
know
So
exactly. I
I
know.
shared that at a meeting once about how I feel terrible, you know, because I feel like I'm lying to my kids. And
Wow.
somebody came up to me and said, "You know what? Why don't you tell your kids you're going to a daddy meeting to become a better dad?"
I
And
like
I was
it.
like,
I
wow.
like it.
And
I
that's what it
like that.
became.
I
So
like
every
that.
time I went out, my kids were like, "You going to a daddy meeting? Can I come to the daddy meeting?" 'Cause, it became a
Wow.
whole thing. And then, you know, oh, so eventually it was kind of funny because I do a lot of fellowship at my house for my home group, which was in the city at the time.
Right.
So I'd have all these people over, and my daughters would be like, where are they from?" I'd be like, "From the daddy meeting." She'd be like, "Well, that's a woman." I'd be like, "Oh, well, she goes to mommy meetings." And she's like, "Is that guy a daddy?" I'd be like, "Well, no, because they have also kid." I was like, "Oh my, they're
Oh
too
my
smart."
God.
So
Oh
eventually I
yeah.
had to tell them,
Wow.
but now in sobriety, through work, they let me facilitate a dad meeting.
Nice. That's good.
So I facilitate a dads in recovery meeting, which is, you know, we like to call it non-denominational because
Sure.
it's not AA, it's not smart, it's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
anything.
It's in it. Yeah.
And you should come to that. It's a
Yeah.
great
What
meeting.
you have to, yeah, tell me again when that is, and I'll, you'll tell me offline. I'd like to try to make that.
It's such a good meeting. And it's
Wow,
on Zoom too if you needed to go.
that's cool.
But
No, I like
yes.
in person.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, man, you and I could probably talk for days. I'm sure we could talk for days and keep going,
Two
but
more and I get the jacket.
yeah, you do. So let's, I'm going to send you that stuff offline about the curriculum that I designed for the schools, and let me know what you think about that. And if you could hook something up with that friend of yours, the superintendent, that'd be really cool.
100%. And just the Sober Not Subtle, I just wanted
Yeah.
to plug one last
Yeah,
thing. So
please.
it's sobernotsubtle.com, you know, sobernotsubtle.com. It's the first thing that comes up. You can go and check everything out there. Also, if there's anybody out there that's interested in being a guest contributor, there's a place on the site that explains it. It says personal stories, and you could submit a story. It's the email on there. I encourage everybody to submit something. You don't have to be sober to do it. You could be a social worker. You can be a best friend of somebody that's sober. You can be a caretaker of somebody that has mental health concerns. It doesn't. We want to hear from everybody. And there is a merch store. I'm wearing a merch
Yeah,
hat.
I like that. I want to get that sweatshirt, man. That's
All
nice.
of the proceeds, every dime of it, it doesn't come to me. It all goes to charity.
Nice.
So it's a fundraising vehicle too. And it goes
That's
literally the place that I use to do the merch store.
right.
Awesome. They actually send the money directly to the charity. There's
That's great.
no
Good.
never touches my hands or anything.
Seamless. That's great.
You can wear this, be loud and proud.
Yeah, I like it. So we're
you're
not
doing
so.
a good thing too. So
Yeah, man. Thank you.
yeah.
All right, guys. Remember, you can find my first book, Lost Innocence: My Journey from Addiction to Recovery, on Amazon.com, both Kindle, paperback versions. And if you go to my Instagram link, you can find the link to my audiobook for Lost Innocence. And remember, if you want something you've never had, do something you've never done. Carpe diem. God bless.